Dr. Yuna Kim pressed her face closer to the holographic display, watching the strange patterns dance across the blue light. The numbers moved in endless sequences that made no sense to anyone who had studied them. For 300 years, the brightest minds in the galaxy had tried to understand these signals. For 300 years, they had failed. The research station floated in the darkness near the Veil Nebula, its metal walls humming with the sound of computers working day and night. Inside the main laboratory, alien scientists from across the galaxy bent over their instruments, trying once again to solve the mystery that had puzzled everyone for centuries. Yuna rubbed her tired eyes. She had been working for 18 hours straight. Just like every other day for the past 2 years, the human woman was the only member of her species on the research team. Most of the other scientists barely noticed her. To them, humans were young and simple compared to the great alien civilizations that had ruled space for thousands of years. Another failure, announced Dr. Vex, the lead Velthani researcher. His blue skin glowed softly in the dim light of the laboratory. The Velthani were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible ability to solve complex mathematical problems. Their brains could process numbers faster than the most powerful computers. Yet even they could not crack this code. Dr. Vex turned all 4 of his eyes toward the massive screen showing the signals from the silent fortress. The ancient structure hung in space like a dead giant, dark and cold. No one knew who had built it or why. It was older than any civilization in the known galaxy. The only sign of life from the fortress was the endless stream of signals it broadcast into space. The pattern analysis shows the same result as always, Dr. Vex continued, his voice filled with frustration. Random numbers with no mathematical relationship. No logic, no meaning. It is as if someone created these signals just to confuse us. Across the laboratory, 3 Hresh scientists worked at a quantum computer that filled half the room. The Hresh looked like giant insects with 6 arms that moved independently as they operated different controls at the same time. Their species had invented quantum computing and could solve problems that other races could not even understand. But the signals from the fortress defeated even their advanced technology. Our quantum analysis confirms the Velthani findings, clicked Dr. Zik, the lead Hresh researcher. His translator device changed his insect language into words the other species could understand. The signals contain no recognizable mathematical patterns, no prime number sequences, no geometric relationships, no quantum signatures. It is impossible data. In the corner of the laboratory, a group of Quinn floated in a circle, their transparent bodies glowing with soft light. The Quinn were telepathic and could share thoughts directly with each other. They had tried to find mental patterns in the signals, thinking that perhaps the fortress was trying to communicate through thought, rather than mathematics. But even their combined mental powers found nothing but chaos in the endless stream of numbers. Yuna watched all of this with growing sadness. The Galactic Research Council had spent enormous amounts of money and resources on this project. Ships, equipment, and the time of the galaxy's best scientists all focused on one mysterious signal from an ancient fortress, and they were no closer to understanding it now than when they had started 3 centuries ago. The silent fortress itself was amazing to look at. Through the laboratory windows, Yuna could see its massive shape blocking out the stars. The structure was bigger than most moons, built from some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange towers and antenna arrays covered its surface. Some parts of the fortress looked damaged, as if it had been in a great battle long ago. But despite its age and damage, it continued to broadcast its mysterious signals without stopping. "Perhaps we are thinking about this wrong," suggested Dr. Lin, one of the few other human scientists on the project. She had arrived just a month ago and was still learning about the research. Maybe these signals are not mathematical at all. Maybe they are something else. Dr. Vex turned his 4 eyes toward Dr. Lin with what Yuna recognized as barely controlled patience. The Velthani had little respect for human intelligence. "Dr. Lin, we have considered every possibility. Language, music, art, biological patterns, chemical formulas, stellar coordinates. We have tested every known form of communication in the galaxy. The signals match none of them. But what if they match something we do not know?" Dr. Lin asked.
What if the builders of this fortress used a completely different way of thinking?
"Impossible," Dr. Vex replied firmly. "Mathematics is universal.
Logic is universal.
Any intelligence advanced enough to build something like this fortress would use principles that we can recognize and understand. The fact that we cannot decode these signals means they are probably just random noise from damaged equipment. Yuna felt angry at Dr. Vex's dismissive tone, but she said nothing. She had learned that arguing with the senior researchers usually made them take human opinions even less seriously. Instead, she turned back to her own computer and continued her work. The signals themselves were fascinating, even if no one could understand them. They came in bursts of different lengths with pauses between them that seemed to follow no pattern. Each burst contained hundreds of numbers arranged in groups. The numbers themselves were not unusual. They used a base 10 counting system just like humans did, which was one of the few encouraging signs in the whole project. Yuna had spent months trying to find some kind of pattern in the timing of the signals or the arrangement of the numbers. She had tried treating them as coordinates for star maps. She had tried seeing if they referred to mathematical constants. She had even tried treating them as music or poetry. Nothing worked. As the day shift ended and the night shift began, Yuna finally admitted defeat for another day. She gathered her papers and prepared to return to her small quarters on the research station. Tomorrow would bring another day of the same frustrating work. More failed attempts to understand signals that seemed designed to be impossible to decode. But as she walked toward the door, Yuna looked back one more time at the display showing the silent fortress. Something about it bothered her, though she could not say what. The fortress looked military to her human eyes. The damaged areas looked like battle scars. The antenna arrays looked like communication equipment from a war zone. Maybe that was important. Maybe everyone was thinking about this wrong. But Yuna was too tired to pursue the thought further. She would think about it tomorrow after some sleep. Little did she know that tomorrow would bring a new member to their team, someone whose different perspective would finally unlock the secret that had puzzled the galaxy for 300 years. The transport ship docked with the research station early in the morning, sending vibrations through the metal corridors. Yuna Kim looked up from her breakfast as the announcement came over the communication system. A new team member would be joining their project today. She wondered what kind of scientist the Galactic Research Council had sent this time. Director Harl, a tall Veltani who ran the research station, gathered all the scientists in the main conference room. His blue skin looked more pale than usual, and his 4 eyes showed the stress that had been building for months. The council had been putting pressure on him to produce results or shut down the project entirely. Fellow researchers, Director Harl began, his voice echoing in the large room filled with aliens from different species. The council has made a decision about our project. They believe we need fresh perspective on the silent fortress signals. Yuna felt a spark of hope. Maybe they were finally sending someone with new ideas. Perhaps another human scientist who might see things differently than the alien researchers. However, Director Harl continued, and Yuna's hope began to fade. They are not sending another scientist. Instead, they are sending a military consultant to evaluate potential security risks from the fortress. Confused murmurs filled the room. Dr. Vex raised one of his long blue arms. Director, how can a military person help us with mathematical analysis? We need more computing power, not soldiers. Director Harl's skin changed to a darker blue, which Yuna had learned meant he was uncomfortable. The council believes that if we cannot decode the signals, we should at least determine if the fortress poses any military threat to galactic security. This consultant will help us understand the fortress from a defense perspective. This is ridiculous, muttered Dr. Zik, the Resh quantum computer specialist. His insect-like translator made clicking sounds of annoyance. We are trying to solve the greatest scientific mystery in the galaxy, and they send us a military advisor. The door to the conference room opened, and a human man walked in. He looked to be in his 60s with gray hair and lines on his face that spoke of many years and hard experiences. He wore simple civilian clothes, but something about the way he carried himself made Yuna think of soldiers she had seen in documentaries about the human wars. This is Hyunwoo Park, Director Harl announced. He is a retired officer from the Human Defense Force. He served in multiple conflicts and specialized in communications and battlefield intelligence. Woo Park nodded politely to the room full of alien scientists. Yuna noticed that his eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in details about the equipment and the people present. Even in retirement, he still moved and thought like a soldier. Thank you for allowing me to join your project, Park said in clear, simple language. I know this is unusual, I am not a scientist or mathematician, but I have experience with military communications and security analysis. Maybe I can help you understand if this fortress was built for war." Dr. Vex looked skeptical. "Mr. Park, we have been studying these signals for 3 centuries. The greatest mathematical minds in the galaxy have tried to decode them. What makes you think a military background will help?" Park smiled, and Una saw something in his expression that reminded her of old teachers who had patience with difficult students. "Dr. Vex, I am not here to compete with your mathematical skills. I am here to look at this problem from a different angle. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes sees things that experts miss." After the meeting, Director Harl assigned Una to brief Park on the project. She felt nervous about working with a military person. Most scientists she knew were peaceful people who solved problems with thinking and research. Military people solved problems with fighting and weapons, but as they walked toward the laboratory, Una found Park easy to talk to. "So you are the only other human on this project," Park said as they walked through the corridors. "That must be lonely sometimes." "Sometimes," Una admitted. "The alien scientists are brilliant, but they think very differently than we do. They often forget that humans might have different ideas about things." Park nodded. "I worked with alien allies during the sector wars. Good people, but you are right about them thinking differently. They often could not understand human military tactics because they approach problems in ways we never would." They entered the main laboratory where the signals from the silent fortress played on the large display screens. Park stopped walking and stared at the endless streams of numbers flowing across the monitors. His expression changed from polite interest to focused concentration. "How long have these signals been broadcasting?" he asked. "As far as we can tell, they have been going continuously for thousands of years," Una replied. "Maybe longer. The fortress never stopped sending them." Park walked closer to one of the displays. He watched the numbers for several minutes without speaking. Una began to explain the various attempts that different research teams had made to decode the signals. "The Velthani tried pure mathematical analysis," she said. "They looked for patterns in prime numbers, geometric sequences, mathematical constants. The Resh used quantum computers to search for complex algorithms. The Quinn tried telepathic analysis to find mental or emotional patterns." "And humans?" Park asked. "What approaches have human researchers tried?" Una felt a little embarrassed. "Well, there have only been a few humans on the project over the years. We tried linguistic analysis, thinking maybe the numbers represented some kind of language. We also tried treating them as coordinates or navigation data. Nothing worked." Park continued staring at the display. "Tell me about the fortress itself. What do you know about its construction?" Una activated a holographic model of the silent fortress. The massive structure appeared in the air between them, slowly rotating to show its different features. Park walked around the hologram, studying it from all angles. "It looks military to me," he said finally. "Those towers could be weapon emplacements. Those arrays definitely look like communication equipment, and these damaged areas look like battle damage from some kind of attack." "That is what I thought too," Una said, excited that someone else saw what she had seen. But the other researchers said that was just human bias. "They said we see military purposes in everything because humans are always fighting wars." Park raised an eyebrow. "Maybe. Or maybe they cannot recognize military construction because their species have been peaceful for so long that they forgot what war looks like." He turned back to the signal display. The numbers continued their endless dance across the screen. Park watched them with the same intensity that Una had seen alien scientists use when trying to solve complex equations. "Dr. Kim," he said slowly, "I would like to study these signals more carefully."
Can you show me all the data you have collected?
"I want to understand exactly what we are looking at." Una felt hopeful for the first time in months. Maybe this military consultant would bring the fresh perspective they needed. Maybe someone who understood war and fighting could finally unlock the secrets of the silent fortress. Park spent his first full day studying the signal data that Una had collected. He sat at a small desk in the corner of the laboratory, surrounded by printouts and computer screens showing different aspects of the mysterious transmissions. The alien scientists worked around him, occasionally glancing over with curious expressions. Most of them seemed to think his presence was a waste of time. Una brought Park another cup of coffee and sat down beside him. She had been watching him work for hours, hoping to see some sign of progress. But Park had been mostly silent, just reading through reports and watching the signal patterns play across his screen. "Finding anything interesting?" she asked. Park rubbed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. Maybe. These numbers you have been trying to decode. Can you show me how they are grouped? Una pulled up a display showing one of the signal bursts. The numbers appeared in clusters with spaces between them. We think the spaces might be important, but we cannot figure out what they mean. Each group has different lengths, and there is no mathematical pattern we can find. Park stared at the display for a long moment. Something was bothering him, like a word on the tip of his tongue that he could not quite remember. The groupings looked familiar somehow. Dr. Kim, during my military service, I worked with communication teams. We had to send coded messages between different units during battles. The messages had to be short and clear because enemy forces might be listening. That makes sense, Una said. But these signals are not human military codes. They are thousands of years old and from an unknown alien civilization. I know, Park said slowly, but look at this grouping here. In human military communications, we often use number groups to identify different things. Unit numbers, grid coordinates, supply codes, personnel identification. Each type of information has a different format. He pointed to a section of the signal. This group has 6 numbers. In human armies, that is often used for map coordinates. This group has 4 numbers, which might be a unit designation. This longer group could be a status report or supply request. Una felt her heart beat faster. You think these signals are military communications? It is possible, Park said, but I need to test the idea. He turned to face her completely. Dr. Kim, you said this fortress looks military to you. What if it really is a military base? What if these signals are not scientific data or philosophical messages, but just routine military reports? The idea was so simple that it seemed almost stupid. For 3 centuries, the greatest minds in the galaxy had assumed the signals contained complex scientific or mathematical information. They had tried to find deep meaning in patterns that might be nothing more than daily reports from soldiers. But the alien researchers tried treating the signals as communications, Una said. They tested every known language and communication method in the galaxy. Park smiled. They tested alien communication methods. But what if whoever built this fortress thought about communication the same way humans do? What if they used military protocols that are similar to ours? He turned back to his screen and began working with new energy. In human military communications, we have standard formats for different types of messages. Battle reports follow one pattern. Supply requests follow another. Personnel updates follow a third pattern. If I am right, these signals should fit into categories like that. For the next several hours, Park worked with intense concentration. He took the signal data and began sorting it according to human military communication principles. He looked for patterns that matched the way human armies organized their messages during wartime. Una watched over his shoulder as Park created different categories for the signal groups. Some groups he labeled as possible coordinate data. Others he marked as potential unit reports. The longest groups he thought might be detailed status updates or intelligence reports. This is amazing, Una whispered, as the patterns began to emerge. You are finding structure in data that looked completely random to everyone else. It is not random, Park said with growing excitement. Look at this. These short groups repeat at regular intervals. In human armies, that would be routine status reports. Units checking in to confirm they are still operational. He pointed to another section of data. And these longer groups only appear occasionally, usually after a series of short groups. That pattern matches how human forces send detailed reports after routine check-ins. As Park continued his analysis, more patterns became clear. The signals were not chaos at all. They followed a logical structure that made perfect sense if you understood military communication protocols. The problem was that no alien species in the galaxy had experience with the kind of organized warfare that humans knew so well. Dr. Kim, Park said, his voice filled with amazement. I think I know what these signals are. They are automated military communications from this fortress. The base has been broadcasting routine status reports, supply requests, and battle updates for thousands of years. Una felt dizzy with excitement. But who were they communicating with? And why are the messages still broadcasting after all this time? Park's expression grew serious. That is the important question. Military bases only send constant updates when they are in active combat or preparing for battle. If this fortress has been broadcasting for thousands of years, it means it was designed to keep fighting a war even after everyone else was gone. He stood up and looked toward the windows where the silent fortress hung in space like a dark monument. Dr. Kim, I think this fortress was not just a military base. I think it was the last line of defense against something terrible. And if I am right about these signals, that something might be coming back. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. The signals that had puzzled scientists for centuries were not abstract mathematical puzzles. They were desperate messages from ancient warriors who had died fighting to protect the galaxy from some unknown threat. And if the messages were still broadcasting, it meant the threat was still out there somewhere. We need to tell the other researchers, Yuna said. Park nodded. Yes, but we need to be ready for them to not believe us. The idea that simple human military experience could solve a problem that stumped alien supercomputers for 3 centuries is going to be hard for them to accept. Then we better make sure we can prove it, Yuna said with determination. Park smiled at her courage. Then let us decode these messages and find out what the fortress has been trying to tell us all this time. Park and Yuna worked through the night, applying military communication principles to decode the fortress signals. By morning, they had translated several complete message sequences. What they found was both fascinating and terrifying. The first complete message they decoded was a routine status report. Defense Grid 7 operational. Ammunition reserves at 60%. Personnel count 0. Automated systems maintaining watch. No contact from command for Cycle 847. 293. Awaiting orders. When Park read this translation aloud, Yuna felt her hands tremble. Hyunwoo, this message is talking about empty defenses and dead personnel. How long has this fortress been broadcasting with no one alive inside? Park checked his calculations. Based on the cycle numbers in the messages, I estimate these automated systems have been running for at least 50,000 years. Maybe longer. They decoded more messages throughout the morning. Supply requests for weapons and equipment that would never come. Personnel reports for soldiers who had died millennia ago. Battle damage assessments for attacks that happened before human civilization began. But the most important discovery came when they translated a series of long messages that the alien researchers had assumed were complex mathematical equations. These turned out to be detailed intelligence reports about an enemy force. Listen to this, Park said, reading from his screen. Enemy advanced scouts detected in outer system. Dark ships using unknown propulsion. No energy signatures visible. Ships appear to consume light and matter. Recommend immediate evacuation of civilian populations. This is not a conventional military force. Yuna felt sick to her stomach. What kind of enemy consumes light and matter? They found more intelligence reports describing the enemy. The fortress called them the Darkness, and described them as ships and entities that seemed to feed on entire star systems. The reports painted a picture of a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. When the day shift began, Park and Yuna called an emergency meeting with all the senior researchers. Director Harl looked annoyed at being woken up early, but he agreed to hear what they had discovered. Conference room filled with tired alien scientists who were not happy about being called to another meeting. Dr. Vex looked particularly skeptical as he took his seat. Fellow researchers, Director Harl began. Park and Dr. Kim claim they have made progress on decoding the fortress signals. Park, please explain what you have found. Park stood up and activated the main display screen. Thank you, Director. What I'm about to tell you may be hard to accept, but Dr. Kim and I have successfully decoded multiple messages from the silent fortress. Dr. Zik made clicking sounds of disbelief. Impossible. We have tried every decoding method known to science. You tried every method known to alien science, Park replied calmly. But you never tried human military communication protocols. He showed the room his analysis of the signal patterns. These are not complex mathematical sequences. They are military messages. Status reports, supply requests, intelligence updates, and battle communications from an ancient defensive installation. The room erupted in protests from the alien scientists. Dr. Vex stood up, his blue skin flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You expect us to believe that human military methods succeeded where centuries of advanced alien mathematics failed? I expect you to look at the evidence, Park said firmly. He displayed one of the decoded messages on the screen. Defense Grid 7 operational. Ammunition reserves at 60%. Personnel count 0. This is a clear military status report. Yuna stood up beside Park. We have decoded dozens of messages. They all follow the same military communication patterns that human armies use. The fortress was broadcasting routine military updates for thousands of years. Dr. Vex examined the translated messages with obvious skepticism, but as he read more of them, his expression began to change. The other alien researchers gathered around the displays studying Park's work. The format does match military communication standards, admitted Dr. Lin, one of the human researchers. But how is it possible that we never considered this approach? Because none of your species think like soldiers, Park explained. Your civilizations have been peaceful for so long that you forgot how military minds work. You assumed these signals contained scientific or philosophical information, because that is how your species communicate important ideas. Director Harl studied the decoded messages carefully. If these translations are correct, then this fortress was some kind of military base. But who were they fighting? Park and Yuna exchanged glances. This was the part they had been dreading to share. We found intelligence reports describing the enemy, Yuna said quietly. The fortress called them the Darkness. According to the reports, they were ships and entities that consumed light and matter from entire star systems. The room fell silent. The alien scientists stared at the translated intelligence reports with growing horror. These reports describe an extragalactic threat, Park continued, something that comes from outside our galaxy and feeds on everything it encounters. The fortress was built as a defense against this threat. Dr. Vex sat down heavily in his chair. If this is true, then where is this threat now? Why are we not seeing evidence of these dark ships? Park pulled up more decoded messages. According to the fortress data, the Darkness operates on a cycle. They attack the galaxy, consume what they can, then retreat to extragalactic space for tens of thousands of years. The fortress was designed to watch for their return. And when are they supposed to return? Director Harl asked, though his voice suggested he did not want to know the answer. Park and Yuna had spent hours analyzing the cycle data from the fortress messages. The timing information was complex, but the conclusion was clear and terrifying. Based on the fortress calculations, the Darkness is due to return within the next few decades, Yuna said. The fortress has been broadcasting warnings and maintaining defensive systems for 50,000 years, waiting for their return. The conference room erupted in panicked discussions. The alien scientists argued among themselves about the implications of this discovery. Some refused to believe the translations. Others demanded immediate verification of the data. But Park noticed that none of them were talking about what to do if the threat was real. The alien civilizations had no experience with total war. They did not know how to prepare for an enemy that could destroy entire star systems. Director Harl, Park said, raising his voice above the chaos. If these translations are correct, we need to do more than just verify the data. We need to prepare for war. Director Harl looked around the room at his panicked researchers. For the first time since Park had arrived, the alien scientists were looking to the human for guidance. Mr. Park, Director Harl said slowly, if you are right about this threat, then what do you recommend we do? Park looked at the decoded messages still displaying on the screens. Ancient warnings from dead soldiers about an enemy that consumed worlds. He thought about his years of military service and all the battles he had fought. First, we need to decode every message in the Fortress database. We need to learn everything the ancient defenders knew about the Darkness. Then we need to prepare the galaxy for a war unlike anything it has ever faced. The room fell quiet as the alien scientists realized that their greatest scientific mystery had become their greatest military crisis, and the only person who seemed to understand how to handle it was a retired human soldier. The next 3 weeks were a blur of constant work as Park and Yuna decoded message after message from the Fortress database. What they discovered painted a picture of an ancient civilization that had fought desperately against an impossible enemy. The civilization called themselves the First Guard, and they had been remarkably similar to humans in many ways. They organized their military along familiar lines, used tactics that Park recognized from human warfare, and faced their destruction with the same stubborn courage that humans showed in hopeless battles. "Look at this intelligence report," Yuna said, showing Park a message they had just decoded. The First Guard detected the approaching darkness 50 years before the main invasion. They used that time to build defensive installations across the galaxy. Park read the report carefully. They evacuated civilian populations to protected systems and converted their entire civilization to military production. Every ship, every factory, every person focused on preparing for the war. The reports described a conflict that lasted for decades. The darkness did not attack like a normal military force. Instead, they sent advanced scouts that drained energy from stars, causing them to dim and die. Entire solar systems went dark as the enemy consumed the light and heat that planets needed to support life. The First Guard fought brilliantly, Park said with admiration as he read more battle reports. They used mobile defense tactics, hit-and-run attacks, strategic retreats to draw the enemy into prepared kill zones. These were smart soldiers. But despite their skill and preparation, the First Guard had been slowly losing the war. The decoded messages showed their defensive lines falling back year after year as more star systems went dark. "Hyunwoo, look at this message," Yuna said with excitement. "It talks about a pattern in the enemy attacks. The darkness does not stay in one galaxy forever." Park read the message she had found. Enemy behavior analysis suggests cyclical pattern. Historical data from other galaxies indicates darkness consumes available resources, then retreats to extragalactic space. Estimated cycle length, 50,000 standard years. They found more messages describing how the First Guard had studied the enemy and discovered their weakness. The darkness was incredibly powerful, but they were also predictable. They came, they consumed, and they left. The key was surviving their attacks long enough for them to move on to other galaxies. So the fortress was not just a military base, Yuna realized. It was a warning system. The First Guard knew they would probably lose the war, so they built these installations to warn future civilizations. Park nodded. They sacrificed themselves to give us a chance. The fortress has been broadcasting warnings and defensive data for 50,000 years, waiting for the next cycle to begin. But the most important discovery came when they decoded the fortress's central mission files. These messages contained detailed information about when the darkness would return and how future civilizations could prepare for them. According to this data, the darkness will return to our galaxy in approximately 37 years, Park said, checking the calculations multiple times to make sure they were correct. The fortress has been counting down to their arrival for millennia. Yuna felt her stomach drop. 37 years. That is not very much time to prepare an entire galaxy for war. They found technical data about the enemy ships and weapons. The darkness used technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Their ships could make stars go out, turn planets into lifeless rocks, and consume entire fleets without taking visible damage. But the First Guard had also discovered ways to fight them. Certain types of energy weapons could damage the dark ships. Specific defensive strategies could slow their advance. The fortress contained detailed battle plans and weapon designs that could give future defenders a fighting chance. "We need to alert the Galactic Council immediately," Yuna said. "Every civilization in the galaxy needs to know about this threat." Park agreed, but he was worried about how the alien governments would react to the news. Dr. Kim, most of the species in the galaxy have been at peace for thousands of years. They have no experience with total war. They might not believe us, or they might panic and make the situation worse. Director Harl called another emergency meeting when Park and Yuna presented their findings about the 37-year countdown. This time he invited representatives from all the major galactic civilizations to hear the report via long-range communication. The conference room filled with holographic images of alien leaders and scientists from across the galaxy. Park felt nervous as he looked at the assembled representatives of dozens of advanced civilizations. "Distinguished leaders," Director Harl began, "what you are about to hear may be the most important discovery in galactic history. Park and Dr. Kim have decoded the fortress signals and discovered evidence of an approaching threat to all life in our galaxy." Park stood up and began his presentation. He explained how the signals were military communications from an ancient civilization called the First Guard. He showed them the decoded messages describing the darkness and their 50,000-year cycle of destruction. At first, the alien leaders reacted with skepticism. The Veltani Council representative questioned how human military methods could succeed where alien science had failed. The Hresh Collective demanded more proof before they would believe such extraordinary claims. But as Park presented more decoded messages and technical data from the fortress, the skepticism turned to concern and then to fear. The ancient intelligence reports were too detailed and consistent to be fake. The technical specifications matched unusual energy readings that some civilizations had detected at the edge of the galaxy. "If this information is accurate," said the representative from the Quinn Collective, Her telepathic voice transmitted through electronic translators. Then our entire galaxy is facing extinction in less than 40 years. Extinction might be too strong a word, Park replied carefully. The First Guard fought the darkness for decades and inflicted significant damage. The fortress data shows that this enemy can be fought and defeated, but it requires total commitment from every civilization in the galaxy. The Hresh representative clicked nervously. Mr. Park, our species has not fought a war in over 3,000 years. We have no military forces, no weapons designed for combat, no experience with the kind of warfare you describe. That is true for most of our civilizations, added the Velthani representative. We have police forces for maintaining order and exploration fleets for scientific research, but nothing that could fight an enemy capable of destroying star systems. Park had expected this response. The alien civilizations had achieved peace and prosperity by abandoning warfare entirely. Now they faced an enemy that could only be defeated through military action, and they had forgotten how to fight. Then you need to learn quickly, Park said bluntly. The fortress contains detailed military plans and weapon designs from the First Guard. We have 37 years to prepare the galaxy for total war. That might be enough time if we start immediately and work together. And who would lead such a preparation? Asked the representative from the Corinth Federation. None of our governments have experience with galactic military coordination. The room fell silent as the alien leaders realized the scope of the problem they faced. They needed to transform peaceful civilizations into a unified military force capable of fighting an enemy that had destroyed the previous galactic civilization. Director Harl looked at Park with an expression that was part hope and part desperation. Mr. Park, you have military experience that none of our species possess. Would you be willing to advise us on how to prepare for this threat? Park thought about the decoded messages from the First Guard, ancient soldiers who had died fighting to save a galaxy they would never live to see again. They had trusted that future civilizations would be strong enough to continue the fight. Director, I will do whatever I can to help, Park said. But preparing for this war will require more than just military advice. It will require every civilization in the galaxy to completely change how they think about survival. The alien representatives began discussing emergency measures and resource allocation. But Park noticed that they were still thinking like scientists and bureaucrats rather than soldiers. They had a long way to go before they would be ready to fight the darkness. As the meeting continued, Park looked at Yuna and saw the same determination in her eyes that he felt in his heart. They had solved the mystery of the silent fortress, but their real work was just beginning. The galaxy had 37 years to prepare for war, and 2 humans would have to teach alien civilizations how to fight for their lives. 6 months after the discovery of the darkness threat, Park stood in the command center of the newly established Galactic Defense Coordination Base. Through the massive windows, he could see construction ships from dozens of different species working together to build defensive installations. The sight filled him with both pride and worry. The alien civilizations had responded to the crisis with impressive speed. Resources had been redirected from peaceful projects to military preparation. Scientists were working around the clock to understand and build the weapons described in the First Guard database. Governments were cooperating in ways that had never happened before in galactic history. But Park knew that building weapons and ships was only part of preparing for war. The harder challenge was teaching peaceful civilizations how to think and act like soldiers. The Velthani Council is having trouble with the concept of acceptable losses. Yuna reported as she joined Park at the command center windows. She had been appointed as the chief translator for all First Guard technical documents, and she spent her days helping alien engineers understand ancient military technology. What kind of trouble? Park asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They want to design battle plans that guarantee 0 casualties among their forces. When I explained that war always involves losses, and that commanders have to make hard choices about sacrificing some people to save others, they said such thinking was barbaric. Park sighed. This was the same conversation he had been having with alien military advisors for months. Species that had known peace for thousands of years could not understand the brutal mathematics of warfare. Dr. Kim, how are the weapons development projects going? Better than the strategic planning, Yuna replied. The Hresh quantum engineers have successfully built prototypes of several First Guard weapon designs. The energy disruptors seem particularly effective against the dark matter simulations we are using for testing. That was encouraging news. The Fortress database contained detailed specifications for weapons that the First Guard had used against the darkness. But the alien engineers had struggled to understand some of the military applications described in the technical manuals. The problem is not building the weapons, Yuna continued. The problem is that most of the alien species cannot understand how to use them effectively in battle. They keep trying to find nonviolent solutions to military problems. Park nodded. He had seen the same issue in training exercises with alien defense forces. Velthani tactical officers would hesitate to fire on enemy targets because they wanted to try diplomatic contact first. Hresh commanders would abort attacks if they detected any risk to civilian populations in nearby systems. Quinn telepaths refused to use psychological warfare tactics because they considered mental manipulation to be unethical. These were admirable qualities in peacetime, but they would get everyone killed when fighting an enemy that showed no mercy and could not be negotiated with. "Sir," called Lieutenant Commander Jin A., one of the few other human military officers assigned to the project. She approached Park with a concerned expression on her face. "We just received reports from the deep space monitoring stations. Several star systems at the edge of the galaxy have gone dark unexpectedly." Park felt his blood turn cold. "How many systems?" 3 confirmed, with 2 more showing unusual energy readings. The pattern matches the early warning signs described in the First Guard intelligence reports. Yuna grabbed Park's arm. "Hyun Woo, that is 30 years ahead of schedule. The Fortress countdown indicated we had 37 years to prepare. Ancient countdown systems can drift over 50,000 years." Park replied grimly. "Or maybe the darkness changed their pattern. Either way, we are running out of time faster than we expected." He activated the emergency communication system that connected him to military commanders across the galaxy. Within minutes, holographic images of alien officers filled the command center. "Fellow commanders," Park began, "we have confirmation that the darkness has returned to our galaxy. Several star systems at the galactic rim have gone dark. This is not a drill." The alien commanders reacted with a mixture of fear and confusion. Most of them had been hoping they would have decades to complete their preparations. Some had been secretly hoping that the threat would turn out to be false or exaggerated. "How long do we have before they reach the core systems?" asked Commander Vel of the Velthani Defense Fleet. Park consulted the First Guard tactical analyses. Based on their previous invasion pattern, the darkness will spend several years consuming the outer rim systems before moving toward the galactic core. That gives us maybe 5 years to complete our preparations instead of 37. 5 years is not enough time, protested Admiral Zik of the Hresh Quantum Fleet. "Our shipyards cannot produce enough vessels to match the numbers described in the First Guard battle reports, and then we do not try to match their numbers," Park replied. "We use the strategies that the First Guard developed through decades of fighting. Hit-and-run tactics, mobile defenses, strategic retreats to prepared positions. We make them pay for every system they take." But as Park looked at the faces of the alien commanders, he could see they were not ready for this kind of thinking. They were still hoping for a technological solution or a diplomatic miracle that would solve the problem, without the need for actual warfare. "Commanders, I need to be very clear about something," Park said in his most serious voice. "The darkness is not like any enemy your species have ever faced. They cannot be reasoned with, bribed, or convinced to leave us alone. They are here to consume our entire galaxy, and the only way to stop them is to fight them with everything we have. But surely there must be some way to communicate with them," suggested Commander Lin of the Human Colonial Fleet. "Every intelligent species can be reasoned with if we find the right approach." Park had been dreading this moment. He activated a display showing some of the most disturbing intelligence reports from the First Guard database. Images of worlds drained of all energy, stars reduced to cold dark spheres, entire populations consumed by entities that fed on life itself. "The First Guard tried communication for the first 10 years of the war," Park explained. "The darkness never responded to any attempt at contact. They simply consumed everything in their path. The First Guard concluded that the darkness might not be intelligent in any way we would recognize. They might be more like a natural disaster that happens to use advanced technology." The room fell silent as the commanders studied the horrific images from the ancient war. For many of them, This was their first real understanding of what they would be fighting. "What do you recommend we do?" asked Director Harl, who had been quietly observing the meeting. Park had been thinking about this moment for months. He knew that the alien civilizations needed strong leadership from someone who understood warfare, but he also knew that most of them would resist taking orders from a human. "I recommend that we implement immediate emergency protocols based on First Guard military doctrine," Park said. "All civilian populations in the Outer Rim systems should be evacuated to protected core worlds. All industrial capacity should be converted to military production. All defense fleets should be reorganized under unified command structure." "And who would command this unified defense force?" asked Admiral Zick. Park looked around the room at the alien commanders. These were intelligent, well-meaning people who wanted to protect their civilizations. But they had no experience with the kind of total war that was coming. The Galactic Council should appoint a supreme military coordinator with full authority to direct the defense of the galaxy, Park said carefully. "This person should have extensive combat experience and deep knowledge of the First Guard tactical doctrine." The alien commanders exchanged glances. They all understood what Park was suggesting, but none of them wanted to admit that they needed a human to lead their military forces. Director Harl broke the uncomfortable silence. "Mr. Park, are you volunteering for this position?" Park thought about his years of military service, the battles he had fought and the soldiers he had led. He thought about the decoded messages from the First Guard warriors who had died defending a galaxy they would never see again. He thought about Yuna and all the other people who were counting on him to find a way to save their worlds. "If the Council believes I am qualified, then yes," Park said. "I will serve as Supreme Military Coordinator for the Galactic Defense." The alien commanders voted quickly. They might not like taking orders from a human, but they recognized that Park was the only person who had both the military experience and the knowledge of First Guard tactics needed to organize the defense. Within hours, Park found himself in command of the largest military force in galactic history. Fleets from dozens of species, weapons based on ancient alien technology, and defensive strategies that had been developed by civilizations that died 50,000 years ago. As he stood in his new command center, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy, Park felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The darkness was coming, and he had perhaps 5 years to turn peaceful alien civilizations into an army capable of fighting for the survival of all life in the galaxy. Yuna joined him at the command displays. "So how does it feel to be the Supreme Military Coordinator?" Park smiled grimly. "Like I have the hardest job in the galaxy. We need to teach entire civilizations how to fight a war, and we need to do it before the darkness reaches the core systems." "Do you think we can do it?" Park looked at the tactical displays showing the defensive preparations taking place across hundreds of star systems. Ships were being built, weapons were being deployed, and soldiers were being trained. It was an impressive sight. But he knew it would not be enough unless they could solve the fundamental problem of turning peaceful aliens into effective warriors. Dr. Kim, 3 centuries of alien research could not crack the code of those fortress signals. But one human veteran recognized them instantly, because humans never stopped thinking like soldiers. Maybe that same human perspective can teach the galaxy how to win a war. Park activated the galaxy-wide communication system and began issuing his first orders as Supreme Military Coordinator. The war against the darkness had begun, and humanity's long experience with conflict would either save the galaxy or watch it burn.